Hey guys, welcome back again, and tonight on your special request, I'm going to show you how to play against Jobava London system. Well, big number of you even know this system, like Ginger Jobava system, thanks to our good friend and always more than creative and crazy in the most positive way, Ginger GM Simon Williams from England, and another guy who respectively used this system in the past was, of course, Grandmaster Jobava from Georgia. In his spectacular fashion, you probably know his great tactical vision and so many good games by that guy, not just in this system, but generally speaking, his tactics was always on a high level. And now we just have to see how are we supposed to play against this system. So here I'm going to give you two approaches. For serious games, the first approach is just to equalize very easily, nothing attractive, actually pretty boring if you ask me. And another approach is going to be like having sparkles and real fire on the board and trying to play for a win all the time. So let's get started. First of all, how do we get the system? When I play d4, we play knight f6. Since many of you are just like beginners or just lower level players, this is Indian system. And the point of Indian system and its flexible knight f6 idea is to prevent e4 by white. And when they play knight c3, they just want to go with e4 next move. So we just need to prevent that. And this is the moment where even though you play Indian system, when they play knight c3 second move, we have to react with d5. What's the point? We gotta stop e4. Now, they have a couple of options. They have bishop g5, which leads to Ragozin system. Verasov system, sorry. They have e4, which leads to Vladimir Gambit. They have knight f3, which leads to some weird positions. And they have bishop f4 that is going to be in the main scope of this video. So this London approach with the bishop and f4 became very popular lately, just like I told you, thanks to these two guys, Simon Williams and Jobava, and an idea is pretty annoying. For example, to most of you, just to show you one pretty primitive way of trading the system. If you play knight c6, you're lost after knight b5, because c7 is about to fall, while at the same time, you can play e5 since they control it with the bishop and f4. On the other hand, you can play knight bd7 either because they just go with the knight b5. So just like you see, it's not that naive. So you just have to go for the following two approaches. The first one is what Carlsen played against Vlad Artemiev a few months ago. He went for c5. And when Artemiev played d3, lots of guys ask me, can they play knight b5 still? No, they can't, because you play queen a5 check. And now you threaten to win the knight. They gotta put it back, and then you just take on d4, play knight c6, harass this queen, go with e5 or d4, and they're almost completely lost. If they play e3, you just go with c takes d4, e takes d4, and play a6. I gotta emphasize the importance of the last move, a6. With this move, you prevent knight b5 forever. And on top of all that, you also don't give them any kind of tactical tricks with the knight b5, as well as bishop b5 doesn't exist when you play knight c6. So they can't play any longer bishop b5 followed by bishop c6, creating some weaknesses in position like that. So how do we play? After knight f3, knight c6. Now, all we want to do here is to complete our development with a light square bishop before we play e6. That means that if they play bishop e2, we just play bishop g4. We solved all the opening problems. I'm ready to go with a6 and then to go with most likely bishop d6, challenging the bishop on f4. So when they play castles, you go e6. In the case of h3, you just take, play bishop d6, and whether they take or not, you just have a very cool game. Queen d2, bishop f4, queen b6, you go after these two pawns. And now take a look at the weak position of the light square bishop and absolute inability by white to defend all these pawns. On the other hand, if they take, we still threatened queen b4, but once again I have to point out a weak position and full inactivity of the bishop on f3. So this is how we equalize. This is why after e6, most of these guys like to avoid this bishop takes f3, and they just swap off the light square bishops. You take and play bishop d6. When they take, you just exchange everything. Position is equal, and black doesn't have any problems. If they try to avoid bishop g4 at all costs and play knight e5, you just go e6, and here you, on purpose, close the light square bishop. But what are we going to do? We just want to challenge this knight with a bishop d6. They take and play knight f4, and we play bishop d6. Once we exchange like this, position is absolutely equal. Artemiev played against Carlsen bishop g3. And after this, Magnus went for this idea, a5 and bishop a6. This is how you easily equalize games in these positions. He eventually won the game, but let's be fully objective. This is absolutely equal and even boring for playing. In the case of bishop d6, queen d6, bishop d3, castles, castles, knight d7. And once again, you know, I have to decide whether you want to go for c5, which is more logical, e5 in some positions, but here you definitely should be going with c5. But in this game, when the guy played queen d2, played a5, and once again, he went, just like Carlsen in his game, played bishop a6, trading off the light square bishops. Black is about to equalize fully. Let's just say this is a simple approach if you want to equalize this Jobava London system. But if you want to go with bishop f4 and a6, then it's a little bit different. Here, you just want to have a bit of like more of explosion and fire on the board. So with a6, we previously stated that we want to prevent both knight b5 and bishop b5, and we want to play c5. When they play e3, you play e6. On purpose, you've just closed the light square bishop on c8, and now you want to go with the dark square bishop on b4. They have following options. They can play a3, bishop d3, g4, or just another type of move like very calm knight f3. When they play, for example, g4, I spoke to some guys, good players, and they said, well, if white wants to go with this Ginger Jobava system, they should be going with g4. It looks interesting, but it gives you nothing. I mean, white. So we play bishop b4, we want to jump with a knight on e4. If they play f3 to stop it, you just now play c5. Simply, development of our pieces is better, and they've just weakened some squares around the king. So I already like our position a lot more. On the other hand, and for example, one game went like this. This captures on d4, brings the bishop back, plays knight c6, and plays this important move, knight e8. Repositioning knight on d6 is very important, as well as breaking on the king side with f5. Black looks a lot better, and I just have to ask you, what is this bishop on g2 doing here? What is this knight on c3 doing? Generally speaking, this is not like a perfect harmony of white pieces, and also I have a feeling that somehow they just put these minor pieces being chaotically placed here. On the other hand, if they play bishop g2 to stop knight e4, we once again break like this. We can play knight e4, that's not a point. Play knight c6, capture on d4, bring the bishop back on e7, threatening the pawn on g5. And when they play this, you just go knight g6 and h6, undermining these pawns and breaking everything. And if they go with h4, you just go h6. So when they take, you play g6. Once again, they're going to have problems with both h6 and h4 pawns. So just like you see, g4 doesn't seem to be anything that special, even though it looks interesting for white. Knight f3 is a normal developing move. You just go with c5. And if they play any a3, you just play b5 with a full queenside expansion on the queen side. If bishop d3, you just take, play knight c6. Here, it's a little bit different because we can't go with a light square bishop any longer, but you go bishop e7, knight b4, harass this light square bishop, and this is how Gary equalized against Mamedyarov. Black absolutely has nice position and no problems at all. If they play knight e5, you just play b5, and I like somehow this massive pawn storm by black on the queen side, and we absolutely don't have problems with black. Apart from g4 and knight f3, they can also go with a3. The point of a3 is to prevent bishop b4, which is initially our main idea. We always break it with c5, and when they play knight f3, we have two options. Going with knight c6 and going with b5. If we go with knight c6, which looks more logical at first glance, bishop d3, next move and type of moves like that you should avoid in your games. But here, black just does that in a very specific and I would say unique fashion. You go c4, and once you close the center, we all know that now e4 should be the main idea, and all white has to do is to break somehow with e4. But the problem is they don't have an easy way to do it. So after you play b5, knight e5, bishop e7, castles bishop e7, he captured on e5, brought a knight back on d7, and played f5. f5 is an important move in order to parry out all these threats, because this queen probably wanted to go with the queen on g4 in the case of castle, and maybe to create some tricks and threats on the king side into the attack. After f5, en passant, bishop f6, castles, and knight c5, I like the flexibility of the pawn structure, and somehow this looks like a very promising position for black, and Van Gaal won this game afterwards by placing his king into safety on h8, playing a5 and breaking on the queen side as well. Very nice game between Bortnik and Van Gaal, played in Riyadh 2017. Another approach could be a pretty classic approach with b5. What's the point of this? This is Carlsen's approach, and most of these guys will play knight e5, which makes sense. But if they play the most logical, bishop d3, you just go bishop b7, castles, knight b7. Why don't you go with the knight on c6 now and play knight b7? First of all, you want to have like better control of e4. And you want to keep the light square bishop open as long as possible. The thing is, naturally, if the knight was on c6, the most natural idea for white was d takes c5 followed by e4. But when the knight stands on d7, and that's the Carlsen's point here, they cannot take on c5 because simply taking on c5 wouldn't be enough for them. Let's say they want to go with e4, bishop e7, and they want to take. Finally, because if you take by bishop, they want to play e4. But we won't give them that pleasure. We just go and capture by knight with a full control of e4 for the rest of the game. So they can't do it with this Carlsen's approach. Apart from this Carlsen's game, where he played against Jobava, rook e1, bishop e7, knight e5, castles, Carlsen captured by knight. Once again, he doesn't want to give his opponent e4 and doesn't want to give him d takes e5 because of knight c5. Jobava went for queen h5, f5, rook c8, played queen b6. He wants to reposition his knight to yf6 to e4 eventually. Wants to just push these pawns like c4, a5, b4. And black once again had an upper hand, and eventually Magnus Carlsen in Doha 2016 won the game. Those who play instead of rook e1, knight e5, trying to remove this knight from d7 and open up queen f3, queen h3 ideas, you just take and once again do the thing that I explained you previously. After bishop f6, in the case of bishop e2, bishop e7, bishop f3 castles, queen b6, you maybe fight against this e4, and maybe they finally manage to do it. But what's the problem? I just go knight e7, harassing this one, and playing rook e8, going after the queen, and I'm just creating some x-rays against the queen on d1 by the very powerful rook on d8. This looks good, and we just like this position so much. So just like you see, this is why most of these guys, instead of bishop d3, play knight e5. Then we go with a bishop e7, bishop e2, and now unfortunately, not that we can't play knight bd7, but here Nispano went with a knight c6, played bishop e7, played castle, and didn't want to give his opponent d takes c5 and e4 ideas. After knight c6, bishop c6, knight a2, he went for queen b6, a5, and had a full control of the center. And eventually he just wants to break on the queen side with b4. He won that game. That game was played in Germany in 2014. And now, just for the end of this video, I left the move that almost everyone played against me in this position when I played this system. It's bishop d3. We go c5. They always take, play knight f3, knight c6, castles, and they all want to go with e4. First of all, you have to remember that we first play bishop d6 before we play castles, because we're very happy to exchange the dark square bishops. First of all, they can't play e4 because bishop and f4 would be hanging. They gotta take, and they gotta decide. If they go back, you take and play e5. We got a powerful center. Once they play e4, we play d4, bishop g4, and we absolutely have no more problems. Here, I'd like to tell you just one important thing. Weak square in white's position is the pawn on c2. Its defender is the bishop. So you always go with the knight d7, knight c5, or knight b4 at some point to weaken the c2 eventually. They go rook e1. You once again go with e5, bishop d3, castles. Once again, we have this beautiful center, the e4, d4, and once again, we absolutely have no more problems in the game. And finally, if they play what everybody does, they take on d6, and then they just push e4. We go d4, we go e5, and we have a very nice position that I explained you previously. Any knight g3 should be opposed with g6. Well, at the same time, light square bishop goes either on d7 or a6, rook goes on c8, and you want to go after the c2 pawn by playing knight e7, knight c5, or knight b4, and weakening the c2 pawn, and this, like the game on the c file for white this way. So if they play knight g3 to go with knight f5, you go castles, and now you just want to go with g6 afterwards, limiting the scope of this knight. In the case of knight d2, to break with some f4, or to maybe go with this knight on c4, castles, knight g3, and you know it. It's like a very known rule that the knight on g3 should be opposed by g6, limiting its activity, and at the same time, it could be chased away with h5 and h4. After h3, bishop e6, a3 to prevent bishop, a knight b4, rook c8, king g7 solidifying position, knight e7 getting like better control once white goes for f4, knight f3, and knight c5. That's another point of harassing the bishop on d3, actually removing this bishop as defender, as well as weakening the game of white on the c file. I hope that you enjoyed in the small presentation of how should we equalize against Ginger, Jobava, and these London systems, and hopefully you won't have any problems. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next time.